Thank you so much for having us here today. CCB and Shalom Austin are our sponsors today. And so we are so grateful to be here. If this information is useful, we are usually back once a year. And then we also do have other talk in the community. If you want this information for a particular group, we are glad to create your own program. And sorry. Oh, it is to this lady here. Thank you. So my name, like I said, is Ginny Erboe. I'll let Mary Beth introduce herself when she comes up. She's going to do the second middle section of our talk. I want to kind of tell you what the day looks like. We do have 2 hours planned. The information is sometimes sensitive, and we understand if you've had a recent loss or had to make decisions for somebody, this may pull on your heartstrings some, and that's okay. We're here for you. If you need to get up and excuse yourself, please feel free to do so, or if you need somebody in a safe place to talk to afterwards, we'll definitely be here for you guys. The plan today is to talk about advanced care planning in a very broad terms and the importance of it, the importance of having the conversation with our loved ones about what's important to us if we could not make medical choices for ourselves. Learn about the foundation of the medical interventions, so that way we're learning it in a space where it's not an emergency, right? It's hard when our loved one's laying in the bed and the doctor comes in and says, we need to put in a G-tube right now. We need to put him on a ventilator and he needs dialysis. And do you want to do these things? That's a really hard time to learn what those interventions are. And so we can answer questions about that. We'll take a little break and go to the bathroom, and in about an hour, come back and talk about the differences between hospice and palliative care. One of our physicians, Dr. Sandra Frelson, will step in and have a chance. If you have any particular questions, she'll introduce herself and talk a little bit about those services with us. Then we're going to talk about how to document our values and preferences in what they call documents called advanced directives. And those are the Texas advanced directives. Lawyers help us do those. So how many of you guys have your medical power of attorney in place? Oh, awesome. Well, so there are some good questions to think about and some good things to know about your medical power of attorney. Attorneys charge anywhere from $350 to $1,000 now to help people do their directives, but we can help you do them for free and also help you update them on your own for free, and also help your family and loved ones do theirs too. So we want to provide that information and how to update your documents and what to do with them if you need, if you have them available. And then also kind of just talk about organizing your affairs in very broad terms. And then we'll open the floor for questions. So that's the plan for today. Once again, my name is Ginny Erboe. I'm a registered nurse. I have been at Hospice Austin in the admissions department for 21 years now. I've been nursing for 29 years now. And I tell everybody I graduated when I was 4. You know, before hospice, I was a cardiac and electrophysiology nurse. I have my bachelor's of science of nursing from Texas Women's University and my master's from the University of Texas. I think hospice work is amazing work. A lot of times people ask me, oh, what do you do? You know, at a party, everybody's having fun. Well, what do you do? And I say, I'm a hospice nurse. And they say, oh, that must be so sad. And I say, you know, no, it's not. It's amazing work. We have a chance to help everybody involved. And the blessing to that all is that it's not my family and friends. That would be really hard if every day I was working with my family and friends. But it is definitely an honor and privilege to be able to help other people have what it could be the best death possible, right? And so I hope that when I get up to heaven, you know, I can look at God and he'll say, you know, you made your mark. this was what you were supposed to be doing. And instead of saying, no, you missed your mark, you were supposed to be a plumber. I hope that that's not what he tells me. So today we're going to talk about all of those things. And to get started, I know that there's a lot of pieces of paper that we're going to shuffle through, but I want you to have written materials to take back with you to share with your family and loved ones or reflect on, because this is not a one and done type conversation. So just because we have it once, 5 or 10 years or 20 years may go by, and our choices may have grown and evolved and changed over that time period. So in your packet of information is this little stapled workbook. And so the gift project. So we received a grant from St. David's Foundation to go into the community to provide this priceless information. And so at the end of our talk today, or if you need to excuse yourself a little early, please fill out a simple, it's like 6 super easy questions about our talk today. And that just provides information to St. David's Foundation that we promise we're doing the good work that we're doing, and we're not just buying lunch for some people out on the streets. So if you can please, we'll provide that survey towards the end, but we'll have them out on the table in case if you do need to excuse yourself early. So GIVE stands for Giving Instructions for Tomorrow. This is the 8th year in our grant. So we have done this talk for over 9,000 people in the community, and we're glad to add you to this number. So once again, if there's anybody else or any other group or neighborhood group that you would like to share this information with, let us know. We're glad to figure something out for sure. So knows or has a guess on what is advanced care planning? What do y'all think advanced care planning is? I know your mouths are full.
It's specified somebody to carry out a wishes.
Jan says it's specifying somebody to carry out your wishes when you cannot. Yes, that's part of advanced care planning. What else? Anybody else have a guess? That's pretty spot on. Yes, sir.
What do you want to happen at the end of your life? What do you want done with your name? Like that?
Yeah, tell me your name.
Henry.
Henry says it's, what do you want to do with your remains? What kind of wishes do you want carried out? And absolutely, all of those are correct. So advanced care planning is just this conversation between our loved ones, our family and friends, and our healthcare providers, talking about what's important to us. What are our values and preferences that might make some medical choices for us, or help to make medical choices for us when we cannot speak for ourselves. So why is this important? I can't tell you how many times I've been at the bedside and the doctors look at the person in the bed and they look at their loved ones and they say, what would Uncle George want given this situation? And Aunt Jan says, I don't know. We didn't talk about this. That's heartbreaking. It is devastating because Jan now has to make decisions based on no conversation. And what really helps our loved ones' hearts in hard situations like that, making these hard choices, is knowing that we are honoring our loved ones' wishes. That helps to ease our hearts. So there's some interesting statistics. If you're a statistic type person, one of our coworkers, Kat, loves statistics. So if we took 10 people over the age of 60, only 3 out of 10 get to make their own medical choices at the end of life. That means 7 of us will have somebody making those choices for us. And I definitely see that in practice. So it's important that our loved ones and our family and friends know what's important to us in case they need to step in and make those choices for us. At the bottom of page 2 just goes over again our agenda for the day. And then we're going to switch over to this little booklet called Your Conversation Starter Guide. So Mary Beth will pick up on page 3 in that packet in a minute, but we're going to look through this little brochure called Your Conversation Starter Guide. And so this little booklet is exactly what it says it's doing. There is a wonderful website if you are more computer savvy. I happen to like paper and pen still. I'm a little old fashioned. But the website is great. It's called theconversationproject.org, and it is in 19 different languages. So if a German is maybe a language that's primary for some of your family, they can utilize the website, and it may just be a little easier for them to comprehend and process. So the Conversation Project starter guide say it's as easy as get ready, get set, go, and keep going. And so it gives us some things to think about as we start to wrap our minds around this. I don't know if you came in here today thinking if you were gonna start to ponder about the end of your life or not, or if you were in a medical crisis. But that's what we're gonna do today, is kind of think about some of these things as a baseline. And then for you to take it home and, maybe have a conversation with a friend on the phone and say, you know what? We went to a wonderful conference today and some things came up that I know I need to think about, but I never really thought about before. So on page 3, if you have a hand and are done eating, maybe you'll jot some notes, or maybe you'll just come back to it later on. But we're going to go through some of these questions and just start to think about them. So on page 3, the first little box says, does a good day look like for you? And some ideas might be time with family or friends, coming to the JCC and, learning something new and getting a little walk or sweat on here, enjoying favorite everyday activities. And what do you need to enjoy a good life through the end of life? I've had several different examples. I had a little 92-year-old male that said playing 6 hours of tennis every day was very important to him. And when he couldn't do that, he was pretty much, ready to focus on comfort care. He wasn't there yet, but I had another little gentleman who was 67-ish, and he said petting his dog, eating ice cream, and sitting in his recliner watching TV was important to him. So very different, right? There's no right or wrong answers. So everybody's answers will probably be a little bit different. The next thing to consider is what or who supports you during difficult times. Some ideas are faith, culture, family, friends, pets, your CCV community, your JCC community. I know there's a lot of great people here. Number 3 is a little bit harder. It says, what matters to me through the end of my life is being able to recognize my children, being independent, being able to spend the time with ones I love. We'll flip over to page 4. These questions get a little easier because they're not open-ended ones anymore. It's a little scale and you can just mark wherever you are on the scale. The first one says, as a patient, I'd like to know only the basics about my condition and my treatment. all the way to, are you a type of person that likes the details about your condition and treatment? And these answers are important to share with your loved ones, right? So they can support and honor you. The next one says, when there's a medical decision to be made, I would like my healthcare team to do what they think is the best, all the way over to have a say in every healthcare decision. And I think that this one's also interesting historically, because probably 2 decades ago, we would have said, whatever the doctors say, I'll do whatever the doctors say. Well, we've really shifted gears now, and the focus is on what does that person want? They're leading their care, and they should be informed with enough information to be able to make those decisions. But, you know, there's somewhere always in between too. What it matters to what you think. The next one says, what are your concerns about medical treatments? One side says, I worry that I won't get enough care, all the way to, I worry I'll get too much care. And if that doesn't even, some people are like, what does that even mean? Then you may be somewhere in the middle, right? You don't worry about that at all. What's that?
Along the right.
Yes, yes. Tell me your name.
Ellen.
Ellen. Ellen's saying, I want the right care. Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully sometimes there is no right there.
right. Well, and it could be, it helps that maybe that's our choice, then that's the right care, right? Even if that's comfort care or full interventions, that's the right care for me because that's what I want. Yeah. If I'm diagnosed with a serious illness that could shorten my life, I would prefer to, on the left, not know how quickly it's progressing or my doctor's best guess for how long I have to live. All the way to the right, understand how quickly it is progressing and my doctor's best estimation for how long I have to live. And then the next one says, if you were seriously ill or near the end of your life, how much medical care would you feel was right for you? Left says, I would want to try every available treatment to extend my life, even if it's uncomfortable. All the way to, I would not want to try treatments that impact my quality of life in order to extend my life. And I'll tell you this, I've answered this little booklet several times and my answers change. And I haven't even been diagnosed with anything yet. And they still change. The next one says, where would you prefer to be towards the end of life? I strongly prefer to spend my last days in a healthcare facility, such as a hospital, assisted living, or a long-term care facility. All the way to, I prefer to spend my last days at home. And so I did meet a lady who thought that being at the hospital and the nursing home was wonderful because she had people there to care for her and she didn't have to worry, you know, at home if somebody was going to be able to care for her. And so she wanted to be at the hospital, and that was okay for her. So once again, there's no right or wrong answers. And just because we plan for, right, we plan for our birth of our children, we plan for our education, we plan for our marriage or life. Just because we plan for our death doesn't mean that it's going to occur anytime soon. And it may not occur as we desire, but it definitely helps us aim towards that goal of what we do want versus if we just leave it open to the air. The last few questions say, if you weren't able to speak for yourself, would you want people to follow all of your wishes or do what they think is best in the moment? I want people I trust to do exactly what I've said, even if it makes them uncomfortable, all the way to, I want the people I trust to do what brings them peace, even if it's different from what I've said. Has anybody experienced that with any of their family or professional? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I'm transgender and I don't want my past spoken about. At funerals and even my dead.
Yeah. And that's important. Yeah. So sharing that with your loved ones that support you, yeah, that'll be important to write that down, get that out.
Yeah, we've actually already, that's what should be on the.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Yeah.
I've experienced having to make health decisions for someone who is in a coma and not able to make them themselves. And we had what we knew about them, and we had what we knew about, you know, the progress might be and what medical things were available at the place we were, which wasn't. Right. And so that was, well, and this is like, with the doctor and the other people around, who were able to make the decision primarily at that stage. Primarily.
And was that what the person had requested, or did you have that?
Okay, that we didn't have a.
Yeah.
Well, one thing Mary Beth will talk about too, thank you so much for sharing. Tell me your name, Sue. Hi, Sue. Tell me your name. Martha. Hi, Martha. Thank you. Mary Beth will talk about a little book called Hard Choices for Loving People. And one of the key things that I took away from that little book is that when we have to make these hard choices in our heart, we're not making that choice to end that person's life. It may feel like that, but it is the conditions and the situation that are going on in their body, right, that brought them to this place. And just because we might have to make a hard decision to turn off a machine or stop an intervention, that doesn't mean that we ended their life. You know, they died from the things in their body and it was their time. And it really wasn't our decision. And so I hope that helps to ease anybody's heart who may have made this choice in a few months or 10 or 20 years or 30 years ago. That, you know, just hold that in your heart that it was conditions in their body that they passed away from.
We have a close friend, actually a neighbor whose wife is at the end of the stage of her life and gets she's doing it home. And her husband is really torn because he has no quality of life.
Right.
But she doesn't want the feeding to stop because her clergy says that you commit suicide. So that infection. And it's a very interesting question. I mean, you're dying. I mean, you know, if you stop the feeding, you'll die naturally. But that doesn't. So sometimes religion gets in the way.
Masha brings up a very good point that there's a friend that she knows that's on a feeding tube and the husband is torn because she doesn't want to continue on the feeding tubes, but her faith, you know, says that stopping those interventions is not something that's within their rules of their faith. Yeah, faith can support and faith can also guide us in different directions. Absolutely. I do think that you bringing one of those little booklets to him may also help. But yes. Yeah.
Well, it serves as I have not stopped feeding.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah.
But the following, but. Of course. He is following now because. The conversation with clergy.
Yeah. Book, it does talk about some of that, and my dad actually was on a feeding tube also from a surgery, and even on a feeding tube at some, you know, at some point you'll still pass away.
So yeah, he was on 4 years on a feeding tube, and he did not want to be on a feeding tube, but back then, that was when I was in my 20s, and we couldn't honor his wishes. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know that that was, we didn't honor what he was telling us. And so I'm glad to be able to understand now that I can help people make those choices for their loved ones or honor their wishes. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when the book was written, there was no way of history affecting in your life. So. What? It doesn't even apply.
Right. 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 It's all interpretations. That's a very good point, Ellen. Yeah. So let's see. Last two. When it comes to sharing information about my health with others, I don't want those close to me to know all the details about my health. All the way to the right, that I'm comfortable with those close to me knowing all the details about my health. And then the last one says, when I die, I want to be alone, all the way over to the right where I want to be with other people. And that was a very important question to consider, because if you are, and I know of people who want to be alone, they don't want their loved ones to witness that or to have that on their heart. It's important that you share that with them, right? And let them know that it's okay for them not to be there. And so we had another example the other day. We were in Lockhart, and a lady shared that her son, who was 32, she was with him the entire time throughout his illness. And he told his sister that he did not want his mother to be at bedside when he died. He wanted to spare her of that. And so the sister was able to tell the mother, and the mother remembered that sort of, but was with her son at the hospital and told her son, I'm just going to go home and shower and I'll come right back. And as soon as she walked out the door, before she was even home, he had passed away. And so it's important to think about if that's something that's important to you, to express that to your loved ones. So also in this little booklet on page 9, how many of you guys have actually talked about this information with your loved ones? Well, so, there's some icebreakers on page 9. It says, I need your help with something. You can text your family and let them know that you've been thinking about this and that you'd like to have a conversation so that it doesn't catch them off guard a little bit. You can also let them know that you're interested to know if they were in a crash on the highway, how much intervention would they want? And it's important for everybody, right? None of us are immune to this. No poverty, no job status, no color, no race, whatever. Nobody is free of this information. You can also say that two gorgeous ladies came and provided lunch today and gave us some homework. And so we, let's talk about this. And it can just be a very open conversation, right? You can even say, I don't even know what to say about this, but I think it's important. And you'll find that the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And just because we talk about it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. Or I tell people we talk about winning the Powerball lottery and we'd all be millionaires and, that'd be great. And we would never talk about death. That would be fine. But that's not how it works. So those are the important things. And the biggest takeaway from today, as well as a lot of the other points, is just to start to have the conversation. So even if you don't document your wishes per se, when your loved one is at bedside, they can still say, we had these talks. We didn't write it down, but I know in my heart what my mom said. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth, and she's going to talk about medical interventions, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk about hospice and palliative care. Does anybody need some water? I can bring you a cup of water. Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
Introduce yourself to
So, good afternoon, everybody. I wander here, just need to trip over the cord there. I'll just hold it. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, if not, just give me a hi-ho or something like that. Thank you so much for inviting us here. As Jenny said, my name is Mary Bethany. I am a nurse with Hospice Austin. I'm not very good with numbers, somewhere between 7 and 10 years, probably 8 or 9. I have been with Hospice Austin. I started as an admissions nurse, what Jenny does, and then kind of went full-time, part-time, and now I'm PRN. And my favorite thing to do is to go out into the community and talk about advanced directives, educate people and help them to do their advanced directives. I am also, I have another little part-time job. I work with Seton Ascension on their medical mission team that does vaccines out in the community, we do community vaccines. So I get to dabble in that, which is really fun too. I was out in the lobby, so I didn't see the show of hands, and if you don't mind, and that's okay if you don't want it, but how many of you folks do have your directives? You know where they are, they're up to date, and everything is good with them.
Depending on what up to date means.
None of your medical power of attorneys have died, and all the phone numbers are correct, and you can find it. Yeah, okay. If you can answer yes to that, to tick all those boxes that I know where my documents are, I've looked at them, no phone numbers, because keep in mind, a lot of us have cut our home numbers. We don't have a home line anymore. We just have a cell phone. So you might need to just update them. But a lot of times, if you haven't looked at it, and of course, you know, this is the cobbler's children don't have shoes. Mine hasn't been looked at 25 years. I'm looking for the big binder that has it in there right now as we speak. So mine needs to be updated because I have a son who's 24 years old. And at the time he was 3, you know, so life comes at us quickly, as they say. So what I am going to talk about is basically a synthesis of this little book, and y'all don't have it, but we're going to put it back there on our resource table. And as you go out, I do encourage you to grab one of these. This book is called Hard Choices for Loving People. It was written by a hospice chaplain who did hospice in facilities, hospitals, and kind of all throughout. And I think he had 30 years of experience when he wrote this. But what this book does is kind of say, what are the positives and the negatives in a layman's terms, not in medical terms, but a layman's terms of when care might be beneficial and when care really may cause more harm than good. So, you know, Jenny and I are nurses, but things change rapidly daily in the healthcare field. So I don't even know all the things that are out there. You know, we find out things on my little flipboard thing that I read. There's always new stuff coming out about what's happening. So it's almost impossible to know exactly what's out there. So the goal is not to know exactly what you want, but the goal is more to say, I know what I really don't want, and this is what I really want, with the understanding that it'll probably change. If you have, all of a sudden you have a chronic disease, or you get a terminally ill disease, or you just get many more health issues, what you want might change. And the other thing to keep in mind is we are all wonderfully unique individuals. So what is right for me may not be right for Jenny. All right. So keep in mind, if somebody says, oh, I would never want that. Well, that's okay, because you might want that, and that's fine. What it is, it's a personal choice, but we want you to be educated about that personal choice, and then think about it, and then tell your loved ones what you want if you haven't already. Now, those of you wonderful folks that already have your documents, I encourage you to pull them out, look at them, make sure they are correct. We'll go over a little bit later. We actually have the forms for the state of Texas in your packets. So it's easy to update them, and we can help you all with that. All right, any questions before we get started? And again, this is your seminar, your presentation, so just shout out something. Yes, ma'am.
When you say update, I know one of our daughters was married, and so you guys have a different name. Can it be just done with writing it, or does it have to go back through the whole notary?
And tell me your name, please.
Jane?
Jane? Okay, so Jane's question is, she has her documents, but she's had an update because, it sounds like a daughter has gotten married and has changed her name, right? The best thing to do is redo the document because they ask not to have scratch outs, whiteouts, or anything on the document. And as easy as it would be to just, change your name and sign and you initial it. It's easy, go ahead and do a clean document.
And is that notarized?
Okay, and we'll get into the
Or is
forms.
witness-
I'm gonna answer it and then we'll get into detail. Okay, how's that? It can be on the medical power of attorney, it could be either or. It either can be two witnesses and we'll get into more detail, but I don't want to just let your question hang. It can be either two witnesses that are not going to benefit from your death, or it can be a notary. Okay, and we'll get into more detail about the paperwork. So if we don't answer it, Jane, if we don't answer it, let us know. Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, so I'm gonna, as Jenny mentioned, I'm gonna roll into medical treatments. You guys have this, and this is kind of a Cliff's Notes version of this book, Hard Choices for Loving People. I don't even know if Cliff's Notes is still out there. It's still out there. Anyway, showing my. Is it still there? Is it still called Cliff's Notes? Okay. I admit I used to do Cliff's Notes. Beowulf, I didn't read Beowulf. I didn't read that. Beowulf, I didn't read it. Okay, I digress, sorry. So I am gonna go in, look it on my page, will turn. Here we go. So, this is just something to think about. Again, we're talking about treatments for you, maybe treatments for a loved one. Then he talked about, we run into situations all the time where we're in the ICU and they say, well, what does your loved one want? And it's like, I don't know, we never talked about it. What a horrible, horrible feeling for everybody. And then your medical providers get real pushy about, we need answers. So what is it gonna be? Our program is called the GIFT program. Our shirts say GIFT on there somewhere. And what that means is giving instructions for tomorrow. And I think it's the best gift you can give your family if you especially do the paperwork and have the conversations, but if nothing else, tell them, wow, I don't really want to be resuscitated if I don't have any brain activity and I'm not breathing on my own. I don't know about anything else, but I know by golly that I don't want that. Or it could be, I want to be full code for, depending on what's happening, I want to be a full code for 2 weeks. And then reevaluate it 2 weeks, but let's see throw the medical book at me for 2 weeks and then we'll go from there. That's okay too. So we're not here to say you got to figure out everything and you got to put it in writing. What we're saying is have that hard conversation with you first and your loved ones. What is it that I want? If you've already done all this and you've probably got loved ones out there that need to have it, and then write it down. And if nothing else, at least do your medical power of attorney. Okay. Back to medical treatments here. So CPR. I got my little CPR. CPR is wonderful. The American Heart Association has done just an incredible job. We have to get recertified dance with this horn. We have to get recertified every 2 years for CPR. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But there are times when maybe CPR is not the right thing to do. I'm an 85-year-old man with multiple comorbidities. I'm bedridden and I stop breathing, my heart goes out. Is it the right thing to go and do CPR, which will probably break ribs, might cause a punctured lung, might cause a lot of pain? Is that the right thing to do? Well, the first question, if you're like me, is, well, what does the gentleman want? Is he a full code? That's probably the first question. I would strongly say, gosh, I hope not, because if he lives, it's really going to be really uncomfortable for him and very, very painful. My son is an EMT with the city and the county, and just the other day, they did CPR on a very frail man, and he said the sound that it made and everything else was just horrendous. So when I go through all of these again, it is number one, what does the loved one, the patient want? Number two, is it beneficial? Is it going to help? How is it going to help? Or is it causing more harm? So I think we always we're on that seesaw, if you will, is How is this going to help me? How is this going to help my loved one? Yes, sir.
CPR. You give it up entirely on the G part now, it's strictly the.
Yeah, I just got recertified just like a few weeks ago. Oh, yes, sorry, so sorry. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Tell me your name. Maury? Okay. Maury asked, is CPR, they given up on the breathing part or is it just compressions now? What they're saying is, hey, if you've got, you know, a mouth guard and everything or an ambu bag where you can breathe with them, yes, but the most important now I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom. Now they are saying the compressions are the most important. Do those compressions, do them, you know, do them rapidly, do them correctly, go down to the depths that needs to be done, get help, call 911. But yes, the compressions now they're saying, you know, if you can do it, fine, do it safely, but the chest compressions are the number one thing now.
It's also circulates blood, brain,
Yeah,
breathing.
yeah, good, if you bring up a good thing. Shoot, oh, I know where I was. I was in Georgetown and there was a gentleman there. We were doing this presentation. We had a weekly one. It was kind of nice for a month. And he was a medic. I'm not sure where, but a medic in the war. And he was told that just move their legs, if nothing else. If you can't do compressions or whatever, to grab the legs and just move them and keep that blood circulating. And that's what they did. So I had never heard that, but yes, thank you. So, okay. So we're still on CPR. Oh, don't have to keep me online because I am like all over the place here. All right. So CPR is wonderful.
I was just gonna say, what are your obligations for the bike and or come across the body and going around?
Well, if you know CPR or you think you can help, you can go ahead because the Good Samaritan rule is going to help you out there. You know, if nothing else, call 911. I mean, yeah, you need to, you know, call 911, get help or whatever, call somebody over if they know CPR. CPR is really hard. You know, we do it on those mannequins. My hands were bruised for 2 days just doing it on the mannequin.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need help. I mean, if you're doing it correctly and you're doing those compressions, you know, they always show it because they don't want to do on a real person, just, you know, they show you bending your arms, your arms are straight and you are compressing that sternum against the heart. Basically, you're pumping the heart for them is what you're doing. So, okay, so CPR again was set up, wonderful, but back when it was actually coming into vogue, if you will, it was for those healthy people that had drowned or that may have gotten electrocuted or something of that nature. So, you know, it's wonderful for that, but it's wonderful. I have nothing about CPR. Give me CPR if I fall down, there's a trip over this cord today. But perhaps in some cases, it is not the right thing to do. All right. Yeah, what it says is if someone does have a terminal irreversible illness, when death is not unexpected, so, you know, the prognosis is short. Resuscitation in this type of environment is violating that person's right to die. I was at an ICU one time. We were admitting someone, and the patient was a medical doctor, and the family was all around. The hospital somehow failed. They didn't do not resuscitate on his record. So, you know, the band, you were the band now. And they've got it posted and it's in their record. So they did revive him. They did CPR and revived him. And the family was furious. He died 3 days later, but it was terrible. He had to have pain meds and everything else. And it's not what he wanted. So that truly was a violation of what he wanted.
Well, a hospital with the ERD, like the, if I talk privately afterwards, will they honor me at the end?
Oh, absolutely. They should honor it. Well, we'll go into that. There are two kinds of DNRs. There's an out of hospital when you have not been admitted to the hospital. So you're in a facility, you're at home, you're at Walmart, HEB, wherever. And then there's an in hospital when you are actually admitted as a patient. You're not in the ER because the ER is not being admitted. When you're not, if you're in for observation, that's not admitted. So there's two different kinds, but if it is a well executed, and I said, my son, the guy that coded with a heart attack, his DNR was not correct. They had not signed him correctly and it was not, but they were able to call their medical director and they were able to do it because the family member was there saying, no, they really want to be a DNR. It's okay to be a DNR.
No,
That's,
I just want to clarify, when I meant ERD, I assume you know what I mean, ethical and religious correct.
oh, no. I do
Okay.
not. Are you
Okay.
familiar with ethical religious director?
Yes, I am.
No, I'm Jenny.
What's that?
Typically, I mean, only if it's written out, I'm not doing.
I think if it was part of your healthcare directive, because remember, when we talk about advanced directives, we're talking about the medical power of attorney, the healthcare directive, and a DNR. So if you, the ethical, the ethical religious.
Yeah, I mean, there's a religious doctrine, so for example, when in the Catholic hospital has the ERD, and the woman gives birth, they say baby over the mother, things like that. That's why.
Don't the nurse, what I said. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I can find out,
I
but
have religious directives, and I was wondering if, I don't care,
those religious directives should be part of your healthcare directive.
yeah. I just want to be sure if I end up at Ascension versus St. David, that if I have a DNR, that they will buy.
No matter where you are, healthcare facility, hospital, or whatever, if you have a correctly executed DNR, yes, they should. We have all heard horror stories of the doctor that, that I saw in ICU. We're all human, it happens, but that's when either you advocate for yourself or you folks that have loved ones and you're their advocate and they truly want to be a DNR, you make darn sure you got that DNR on file. Where's their DNR bracelet? You make sure that.
There are a couple rules to the DNR when they say that this cannot be honored.
Pregnancy.
Talking about when you're pregnant, okay,
Attempted.
yeah, so there
Yeah.
are a few things on the actual.
Jenny brings up a good point. Pregnant people, pregnant ladies, and
Murder or a.
suicide, attempted suicide or crime. They will not honor the DNR. That it's on the back.
I'm looking for that, it's on.
It should be on the back on the definitions, I think,
Yeah.
on the back. The instructions. Okay. So, CPR again. Now let's go to feeding tubes. Jenny mentioned feeding tubes. Feeding tubes are wonderful. My father had an NG tube. That's that nasal gastric tube that goes down your nose and into your stomach. He had one temporarily for a while. He ended up with lung cancer, and had dementia and everything. And he hated it. And every patient I've known that had an NG tube has pulled it out at least once or twice because they're very bothersome. They irritate your nose and they irritate your throat, but they can be very, very helpful. If you've got obstructive bowels or something like that, you want one in there to calm everything down. So again, but an NG tube is usually very short term. Most people, you're not going to have an NG tube for months and months, a nasal gastric tube or anything like that, because they will cause other issues, other problems. Different kinds of feeding tubes. We can have a gastric tube that's right outside where you can actually put foodstuffs, you can put medicine and things such as that. Oftentimes very, very helpful for people who have abdominal issues with GI tract or anything of that nature, can be very helpful. And as long as they're taken care of and everything, it can be very, very beneficial to people. Peg tubes, feeding tube, again, can be wonderful, wonderful forms of treatment that should be used, should be tried, for if they are going to be helpful. A lot of times you can get pneumonia, you can get infections. So they do have to be taken care of. They're not something that can just be placed and then you don't have to worry about them for a long time. we always talk about end-stage dementia because it's kind of a unique animal. A lot of times when people are at end-stage dementia, the treatments that we would do, the feeding tubes, antibiotics, or multiple antibiotics, oftentimes don't work because they are at end-stage dementia. And a lot of times they'll create more issues. They'll have swelling, they'll have edema everywhere because the fluid is not going into the veins, it's going into the tissues. Aspiration pneumonia, bed sores. It could be, again, it could be more of a burden, more of a hindrance than beneficial. All right, IV hydration is wonderful. As a hospice nurse, I used to encounter all the times people coming in and saying, or I would be at a home or something, and the loved one would say, I don't want my loved one to go on hospice because you're going to starve them and not give them anything to eat or drink. And that was a very real fear of theirs. And, you know, to myself, I'm going, no, not. But so, you know, you do some education and some explaining. And it's not that we are starving them. You can always usually give little ice chips and things like that. But when someone is actively dying or very close to the end of life, the body shuts down because the heart needs to go, the lungs need to go. So they're not up and about walking like you and I, so they don't need box lunches from Jason's Deli because they're shutting down, their systems are shutting down. So and that's often, here in America, we show our love and everything by, you know, food and drink and holidays, Thanksgiving and so on. So that's, you know, every time my family gets together, we have an overabundance of food and then you have to take it all home too, because no one eats it all. So, you know, that's kind of how we show our love. All right. Questions? Comments before we move on? All right, we're going to talk about ventilators. Very, very popular, especially during the COVID pandemic, about ventilators. I have a family friend who came off of a ventilator not too long ago. He was actually doing ECMO and a ventilator, and he is okay now. He's in his 50s, but does have multiple comorbidities, a bunch of stuff going on. But the ventilator was helpful, and they were able to wean him off the ventilator. Oftentimes,
What's ECMO?
ECMO is where basically you're in a machine, and the machine is your lungs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's used when someone is very, very, very ill and they're not able to breathe on their own. There's usually two.
It's both cardiac and respiratory.
So heart and lungs. And there's usually two nurses and they are truly just there for the ECMO machine and then there's a nurse for the patient. Yeah, it's one of the most intense interventions you can get nowadays, besides having, you know, heart surgery or lung surgery. So kind of like dialysis is doing the kidneys, ECMO is doing heart and lung. That makes sense. Did everybody hear that? What's ECMO?
No, they didn't.
Yes, sir.
These things are very expensive. And so if someone dies, is anyone responsible for doing that?
Well, if they have insurance, they're gonna, you know, insurance is gonna be billed.
I mean, because that's my knowledge, they're at state.
Yeah.
The ones, but I mean, we provide the medical information, you know, that's a really question.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, if you have insurance or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, they're gonna file on that. But as Jenny said, if there's everything's usually copay now or deductible.
Yeah, those are legal questions, but yeah. You know, I just know that the estate is part of.
I know we had to pay my dad's bills when he died.
Yeah.
Say that again?
We had to pay my dad's bills, his, you know, his insurance bills and everything. We had to pay them. The family, you know, my sister. Well, if you're lucky to have an estate that has funds in it,
Yeah.
you know, but a lot of people aren't. I mean, you know, so yes, I mean, these are very, very expensive treatments and so on. I have never worked in administration of a hospital, so, you know, I don't know the thought process or the flow sheet they go through for all that. But yes, obviously your loved ones, your estate is going to be responsible for debts, and healthcare debt is one of them. Now, there are wonderful companies out there that help get rid of healthcare debt. I saw it on 60 Minutes not too long ago. But I mean, yeah. And then sometimes, they write it off or whatever, but that's rare. I think it's a debt. Healthcare is a debt, just like credit card or, anything else.
Well, if you have a debt, your children are responsible for your debt. I'm not sure whether it's spousal.
It's about the only it's part of the estate by now, and yeah.
Yeah. I really shouldn't be speaking because I don't know. I just know what happened to us and what we did. So, yeah. I mean, I guess they can come after this. Well, that would be one where we would have, an estate attorney or somebody like that. But, okay. So ventilators, again, COPD, emphysema, heart disease, usually sometimes people are on ventilators for that. I remember a time when I was an admissions nurse and we were in the ICU again and they were getting ready to extubate someone who had been on a ventilator. And doctor and everyone said, well, it's probably going to be very short-lived once we pull this person off the ventilator. And so people were thinking, well, why are you going to put someone on hospice when they're going to die within probably half an hour? And the reason is because of bereavement services for the family, and which is a hospice benefit, which we'll go over a little bit later, but it doesn't make any sense. Gosh, you're going to get someone on hospice and they're going to be on it. It took me longer to admit the person, than they were actually on services, but there are bereavement services and everything else that is beneficial. Okay, dialysis. Hemodialysis, kidney patients usually becomes, especially if you have to go to a dialysis center, it becomes a way of life. It's usually 3 times a week, maybe 4 hours each time, depending on how severe your dialysis is. They now have peritoneal dialysis that can be done at home or somewhere like that, where instead of the machine filtering the blood, it's actually the peritoneum, the lining of the abdomen is filtering. So they put in the fluid, and then that kind of clears out, because remember what your kidneys do is get rid of all the toxins, is what the kidneys do. So again, a frail person who's in a nursing home, whose kidneys are failing, is it right to put them on dialysis, knowing they'll probably need dialysis till the end of their life? Or is there something else that we can do for them to keep them comfortable and keep them not having to go through the intensity of dialysis? Yeah. Here's a statistics. It says for elderly patients on dialysis, 76% are hospitalized in the last year of life. Half of those are admitted to intensive care. And one study found that 61% of elderly patients regretted ever starting the treatment. I had a cousin who had polycystic kidney disease. It was genetic. And she was on dialysis for she's an outlier. She was on dialysis for over 30 years. She passed away recently, but she had been on the kidney transplant list and was not able to go and get her kidney transplant because she was sick at one time and the other time it wasn't well or something of that sort. But it is a way of life for those folks. Okay, questions? How we doing? I'm almost done here. I know everyone's getting sleepy after. We'll stand up.
One quick question. I noticed in your package, there's an out of hospital, do not resuscitate. Where's the in hospital one?
We only do that when you're going into the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll if you're going in for elective surgery or something, when you go in through admissions, they'll go to the one.
Is it good for that, only that visit, or does it send in your file for the future?
What's that?
Only that visit, every time you're admitted, it's that.
And they should ask you again and again, because you may change your mind.
Exactly.
Yes. So, because remember, you can always change your mind. You can always fill out the paperwork, and if you don't want to use it, you don't use it, as long as you can make your own decisions. All right. Antibiotics. Antibiotics are wonderful. But perhaps again, may not be the right thing if someone has been in and out of the hospital the past 6 months with UTIs or pneumonia or something of this nature. And there's a quote here that says, dying from pneumonia, dying from pneumonia can be very peaceful. It used to be called the old person's friend because of how gently it took someone who had long been disabled by disease. And Jenny mentioned this, that anytime, you know, if you ever find yourself in the situation where you or a loved one, you had to make a really hard decision to remove someone from a feeding tube or remove someone off of a ventilator or something like that. It's not you taking that person's life, it's the disease process that's doing it, all right? So I think that's really, really important to remember. And so oftentimes, people who have been in and out of the hospital, maybe with recurrent UTIs or something of that nature, or pneumonia, because oftentimes they can go together. They're just saying, you know, I'm tired of going in and out of the hospital. It's such an ordeal. I always get hospital psychosis every time I go in there, and I come out worse than when I went in. I just want comfort care. And oftentimes that's when we get people onto hospice. They say, you know, I'm good, just keep me comfortable, let me be what I want, where I want to be and what I want to do, and just keep me comfortable. So oftentimes those folks that have been in and out of the hospital because of recurrent infections or whatever do transfer to hospice. Questions, comments? Jenny, did I forget anything? Okay, we are at
111.
Oh, 111. Why don't we get up and get some oxygen to our brain and move around and go to the restroom? I don't know where they are. I guess on
Right through these doors.
I will.
Yes.
So about 10 minutes. Whenever you come back, fine.
So my name is Sandra Krelson. I'm the medical director at Hospice Austin. I've been at Hospice Austin for a little over 11 years, and I'm the medical director for a little bit over 4 years. And I joined the board of Capital City Village at the end of last year. So it was great that I could be here for 2 reasons. So I'm so glad you're all here today and thinking about advanced directives. It's really one of the biggest gifts you can give to your family. We see so many people who either didn't identify a medical power of attorney and they're in a medical situation where they can't speak for themselves, or we do know who to talk to, but they really haven't had a conversation about what their wishes would be if they couldn't communicate for themselves and make decisions for themselves. So taking care of this paperwork and talking with the person you would want to make decisions for you about what your wishes would be is so helpful. And sometimes we're having to coach families through making decisions based on just a few crumbs of conversation based on a movie or a TV show or another family member's experience. And the more these conversations can happen in advance when there's no crisis, the better information people have if they're then in a crisis and needing to make some decisions. So having said that, I'll transition to talking a little bit about hospice and palliative care. So hospice is a Medicare defined benefit but it's available for people with other insurance as well. And it's really 2 things. One is that they have a serious illness and their healthcare team thinks that their likely prognosis might be less than 6 months. And the other is that they're wanting to focus on comfort. And hospice come and sees people wherever they live, whether that's at home, in an assisted living facility or a skilled nursing facility. And there's an interdisciplinary team that comes, so that's a nurse case manager, social worker, chaplain, certified nurse's aide to do personal care. We have a physician and advanced practice nurse who come see people at home, and there are volunteers who come, and then other disciplines kind of as needed, like dietitian, for example. Hospice covers medication, medical equipment like hospital bed or oxygen, supplies like briefs, wound care supplies, things like that. And it really, Medicare expects that hospices will cover nearly all of the care that people need. Most people don't really want to keep going to the hospital or medical appointments at the point where they call on hospice, but sometimes people do have a couple appointments they still want to go to, or someone they have a long relationship with where they want to continue to see them and involve them in their medical care. And the hospice team tries to collaborate with that person and make sure that everybody's on the same page for the purposes of that visit, and then that visit would still be covered by hospice. The other thing I was gonna say, that the key part of hospice is that there's bereavement support for the family and caregivers for 13 months after the person dies. And so that's a really helpful benefit. And bereavement support is available through hospice, even if someone's death happens off of hospice. Say that somebody dies in hospital, their family could still call hospice and say, I'm looking for some bereavement support. But if somebody's enrolled in hospice, then that is automatically available for their family. The other thing is that there's another service that is called palliative care, that focuses on serious care for people with serious illness that we don't expect to be curable. When they are having symptoms that are difficult to manage, or there's a caregiver burden, or they're wanting to talk more about advanced directives and kind of anticipating. And that service does not require that the prognosis is quite as short as hospice. And people can pursue palliative care even if they're also still pursuing life prolonging therapy like chemotherapy or things like that would not necessarily be part of hospice. And hospice often has a palliative care service called Austin Palliative Care. And if you're ever choosing a hospice or palliative care program, you always have a choice. And it's ideal to kind of figure out which one you want and then request that one by name. Because sometimes, for example, if you're in a particular hospital system, and that hospital owns a hospice, they kind of automatically would refer you to that hospice unless you express a preference. And sometimes, to be honest, we see that people's preferences, they try to, I'm trying to think of a polite word to say it, not necessarily go with that, and they'll try to push the one that the hospital prefers, but really you have the right to request one by name, and it sometimes you need to advocate for that, but it's really important that your wishes are respected. The two best ways to choose a hospice, in my opinion, are to ask people what they recommend. And in this area, Hospice Austin has been around for 40 years, and many people have had a positive experience with Hospice Austin, and that's what I hear people recommend. The other is Medicare has a really useful website, carecompare.gov, where you can look at different hospices and see how many patients they care for. Have they had any citations, negative citations from the state? What's their star rating? So Medicare now has a 5-star, up to 5-star rating, and Hospice Austin has a 4-star rating right now. We're working on becoming a 5-star hospice, and there are a few others in town that are 4-star, but many are 2- and 3-star. And the main thing that goes into those ratings are surveys filled out by family members of people who are cared for on hospice, who then answer a pretty extensive set of questions about how the care was and what they would rate the quality. And so that is one of the most useful ways that you can choose a hospice. If for palliative care, there isn't necessarily ratings to be able to compare, but you can still ask people about, ask the program what kinds of services they offer. Some home health programs have a palliative care service, and often it's really just one advanced practice nurse who sees patients, and they still would hopefully look at the different disciplines of palliative care, psychosocial, medical, spiritual, but really there are areas of expertise for those disciplines, and one person can't possibly represent all those disciplines and be an expert at that. Often palliative care, which is the affiliated palliative care program with Hospice Austin, has a physician whose full-time job is overseeing the palliative care program and seeing patients. That's Dr. Kate Tyndall, my colleague, who is a really, really excellent physician. And then there are 4 advanced practice nurses, a social worker, and a chaplain who are available to help see people at home or wherever they live, and attend to people's symptom needs. Like I said, advanced care planning, collaborating with their medical team, and trying to kind of figure out what their goals of care are and anticipate what might be coming next, and help figure out what they want to do and when would be the best time to transition to hospice if things get to that point. Our goal, just like advanced care planning, is to try to help people anticipate what might come down in the future and avoid a crisis where it can feel really overwhelming as a family or as a patient trying to kind of figure out what's next. And so one of the things that people can do is ask for an information visit with hospice to try to just kind of get a sense of their service. Sometimes people interview multiple hospices, or if somebody is appropriate for palliative care, then they can kind of say, when's the right time for me to transition to hospice? Ginny and Mary Beth, are there things that I should have spoken about there, or anything you want to add? Yeah, sure.
And then, so is APC home-based only?
Home-based assisted living, and they do go into a few skilled nursing facilities.
There's no office.
No, there's no office for palliative care. So Hospice Austin also has an inpatient hospice unit. I'll say this and then I'll answer your question. Hospice Austin Christopher House, and it's possible some of you have been there. It's a really amazing place, right? It's over on East Martin Luther King Drive, and there are 14 beds that are available. If they're on hospice and their symptoms cannot be controlled at home, then they can go there for intensive symptom management, even IV medications to control symptoms. Sometimes people go back home, sometimes they stay at Christopher House till the end, but it's got outdoor space for each of the rooms, and there's some communal space where family and friends can gather, and family can stay overnight if they want. There's a pull-out couch and a kitchen that can be used, and some meals are provided, and there's many volunteers who go there. My favorite are the ones there's therapy dogs and other therapy animals, and a lot of musicians come there and play music, and it's just got a really nice energy to be there.
Pets can go.
Yes, you're right. Pets can also go, which is really great. Because a lot of times, yes, because we find out in the hospital, often people are really missing their pets and they really want them to visit, but hospitals are just a little bit strict about that. And so that's one of the really nice things about our house.
And you're saying stay there, not.
Yes, they can stay. Yeah, usually they visit and then go, but they can stay. It's just that obviously pets require a fair amount of attention, and sometimes there's a lot of other things that people are wanting to pay attention to. So it's more common that they can stay. And right now we're the only inpatient hospice unit in the 5 counties that we serve. And so if you're talking to other hospices, you can ask them what they do if symptoms can't be managed at home. Sometimes there's inpatient hospice provided in a skilled nursing facility, but also sometimes people do it in the hospital. But it's just not the same as personal health, I gotta say.
First of all, or
Great question. So under Medicare, hospice is under Medicare Part A, and there's no copay for hospice, no charge for the equipment or supplies or the medications that are covered. There are a few medications that are covered outside of hospice, so that would still be through Part D or through however people were paying for medication. And there sometimes can be a copay for a physician or a practitioner visit at home. It kind of depends on people's insurance and secondary insurance and all that, but there's no copay for hospice. So I don't want to claim to be an insurance expert, that's for sure. But so it depends. So Medicare, Medicaid, and MAP, there's not a copay. For private insurance, it really varies depending on the insurance. And if people have a Medicare managed care program, right now, if they enroll with hospice, it reverts to traditional Medicare. That may change in the future, but sometimes people have copays on their Medicare managed care program, but then they would not if they. Good question. So we have a charity program that's underwritten by donors in the community, which I take as a big symbol of their support for us. And then we have sliding scale if people don't meet the criteria for charity care, but they don't, they really couldn't afford full price. And so we really try to work with people to either if they don't pay anything or they pay something that they can afford.
And so what career charity work? What is that?
Yeah. So the first thing is 3 weeks after the first loved one's death, the bereavement team reaches out to just check in and see how people are doing. And there's a series of mailings that go out, and we have a lot of support groups and one-on-one bereavement counseling that's available. If people are on hospice, that's free of charge. If the loved one was not on hospice and they're doing it separately, then it's charged based on a sliding scale fee.
Did you?
Healthcare policy.
Yeah,
Is it mainly home health care and hospice?
good question. So again, I'm not an expert on this at all. But my experience has been that it will cover caregivers in the home, or sometimes if somebody really, if they're needing skilled nursing care or to be in a 24-hour facility, like a nursing home, that their long-term care policy may cover that. And because hospice is covered by Medicare Part A, that would be, they could kind of have both, because Medicare doesn't pay for the nursing home room and board if people, unless people are doing skilled nursing rehab, like post-hospitalization. So if somebody's in a nursing home on hospice, then the patient or family is usually paying the room and board rate, but a long-term care policy might pay for that. There's so many, it depends on what it is.
If you haven't looked at your long-term care policy yet, or in a long run, I suggest, work up on it, call them, have them send you the policy. They all different nuances here and there, so.
Yeah, now that there's a period of time that you have to pay for services before you can start to access the money, ask how care. If you can get repairs, you can utilize the benefits. Into
Tell your family members what you learn.
Yeah,
If they do not pay for, oh, I need to go on medical.
yeah, because
The other thing is if people have VA, if they're VA connected, that also covers the hospice benefit. If very nuanced, so we try to, if people are enrolling with hospice, we try to really be in close contact with the VA to make sure that care is coordinated, and the VA will sometimes cover some care like chemotherapy that would not typically be covered when people are in hospice. So there, it's a way that I think the VA is being quite innovative and not being as black and white as Medicare of these are things you can do on hospice and these are things that you can't. But it's not surprisingly, because it's the government, it can become confusing to me anyway. Yes, please.
Yeah, another Medicare. I thought there was a limit on Medicare on 30 days. You're saying it would be covered for the length of the life if they live 8 months.
Yeah, so as long as, so Medicare for hospice has eligibility periods, and each time the team and the physician assess, at this point in time, do we think that the likely prognosis is less than 6 months? And so it's, after the first 90 days and another 90 days, and after that, it's every 60 days. And so each time we just make our best assessment right then, but it, and sometimes Medicare is doing a lot of audits. They're really trying to make sure there's not fraud and abuse, like in other healthcare sectors. Of course, there's some fraud and abuse, but they're trying to kind of take a really close look at that. So we try to make sure that it's really well documented why we think somebody is still eligible, even if they have a long length of stay. And every quarter, I just did this at the beginning of the month. I look at everybody who's been on our service for more than a year. And I look and see, do I think they're still eligible? So sometimes I give some feedback to the team of, can you take a look at this? Like, some questions about this. And then I give the physician specifically some feedback about their documentation, so that I make sure that we think they're still eligible, and that we put it in a way that we think Medicare would believe us.
And just clarify, I am not understanding totally on hospice care. Somebody will come to you in your home, in your living facility, in your nursing home, for your.
Yeah.
Is there a facility that hospice has?
So Christopher House, hospice office, Christopher House, our inpatient unit is the one facility we have, and that's just for inpatient level of hospice. So when symptoms can't be controlled at home and there's a crisis. But otherwise, the team is visiting the person wherever they are. The nurse might stay for an hour or two. The aides come, 2 or 3 times a week if people want that, and stay for an hour. Other people would visit periodically, but the family and caregivers are providing the other care. The team, though, is really trying to make sure that the caregivers and family have education and training, so that they feel comfortable that there's a plan for today, and that is sort of anticipating what might happen, and that there's a plan for that. Hospice is open 24/7. So if there's a crisis in the middle of the night, the family can call Hospice Austin or the other hospice and get advice over the phone, or have a nurse come out to do an assessment. We always have a physician on call who can change the orders if needed, and make sure that people can stay comfortable.
Do they ever have a conflict then with the staff, the nursing home?
That's a great question. So when people are in a facility, the facility staff are the ones who are providing the hands-on care most of the time. And our staff come in and are kind of a second set of eyes and hands. So they're kind of doing their own assessment, working with the staff to make sure everybody's on the same page, kind of see what the staff have seen when we aren't there. Are they seeing that at 9 o'clock at night every night, Mrs. So-and-so is getting very agitated and anxious, and we need to do some medication adjustment or some kind of non-medication adjustment to try to prevent that. I would say, anytime people work together, there can be conflicts, but we generally have really good working relationships with the facilities we work with, and put a lot of effort into maintaining those relationships. So we try to be united in the message that we're giving, in the care we're providing, and so it's something that that requires attention for sure. Any Mary Beth, anything else I think we can talk about?
This is a real treat to have you, Dr. Cole.
Yes. Yeah, that was really special treat for us today. So nice to hear what she has to say and listen to her words of wisdom for sure. We have about 15 minutes. We want to be respectful of the 2 o'clock sort of stop time. Mary Beth and myself will be here afterwards if you do have more questions. Also in your packet of information, we do have our cell number and our emails. So if you get home and dive into this material and really start to think about some things, I have further questions, please feel free to give us a call or email us. Our information is in the back of that stapled packet. And it is on that last page. It's on that? Yes. It's on that last page, and then it's also stapled. It's also stapled in this last booklet page. Our name are Ginny and Mary Beth, and we are on there. I will say that if you call me, I may be a little obtrusive at the beginning until you just say, well, I met you at a talk, and I'll be like, oh, I do want to talk to you. I just didn't know you weren't spam. So I've gotten much better because Miss Williams called me and she was talking to me and I was like, yes, this is Ginny. And anyways, I found out who she was, and I honestly do want to talk to you. I do want to support you. So quickly, let's go over the Texas Advanced Directives. So directives are a way that we document all of those things that we talked about, our values and our preferences. And the directives help guide our family and our healthcare providers with what we would want if we couldn't speak for ourselves. If you do need to excuse yourself, there is a quick little survey on the table, if you could please. Oh, great, thanks, Mary Beth. The medical directives are what we're covering today, and they only go into effect if we cannot speak for ourselves. So as long as we can speak for ourselves, we can tell our doctors and our families what we would like. If we cannot, that's when they turn to the directives and those conversations that we have with our loved ones. So the first form that I want to review, and I also will say that directives are done state to state. So what does that mean for those of us in Texas? In Texas, our directives are all separate. And the only one that needs to technically be signed by a physician is the out of hospital do not resuscitate order for adults. So if you had an attorney draw up your directives for you and you think you have a do not resuscitate, I would almost say 99.9998%, you might not have an out of hospital do not resuscitate order because the attorneys don't draw this form up because it needs to be signed by a doctor. So we'll go over that last. But in the packet on the right-hand side, Mary Beth, can you help grab her directives out so she can see? Yeah. So our directives in Texas are all individual. So in some states like California and New York, they are all tied together as one order and signed by a doctor. So they are your directives and an actual order. In the state of Texas, because you know we're special and big and important, ours are separate. So legally, our orders or our directives are supposed to be honored, but your medical power of attorney, who you request to speak for you to make medical choices, if you're not able to, can override any of your other choices because they're acting in your best interest, right? So it's really important that you pick the right person to be your medical power of attorney. And that may not be your spouse, it may not be your oldest child. It needs to be somebody that can stand up and advocate for you, ask good questions to healthcare professionals. Your oldest child can't ask good questions to the teacher and starts to shake at their knees, not probably the best person that you want assigned to make these choices for you. It may be a loved one, it may be another community member that maybe has a medical background that you've talked to and agrees to be this person to stand up for you and advocate for you a little bit further emotionally removed. And so that's something to think about. If you have yours done, which I know a lot of you guys do, like Mary Beth said, go get them out of that binder, go find them, get them out of the safe. We can lay these around on the coffee table. There is no protected information on these, but they need to be pulled out, made copies and given to the people on it. Also to your healthcare providers, and you need to have access to them, right? Sometimes we recommend just having a little folder that has your directives in it, a list of your medication, a list of your important people, a list of your health conditions and concerns. And that way you can just grab it and go, or maybe you have it in your car in case you're in a car accident or something. That helps you get the best and fastest care at the hospital, right? Rather than the doctors kind of just looking at you and checking some labs. They'll know that you have, a Parkinson's and a tremor and a seizure disorder and a blood sugar disorder. Yes. Directives, yeah, or just a little envelope, in the side next to your car seat that says medical on it. And you can grab it and go, or if you
Sit on your billfold.
well, and in your billfold, you can make a little small card. Actually, Mary Beth, if you'll bring my red satchel to me, I have a few left.
It would be in your wallet.
And he might have an example. I have a few that some people can have. There is a little teeny thing that Age of Central Texas used to give out, but that they stopped making them. It's this little thing, and it has all of your emergency contacts, medication, important people written in a very small manner. I think I have about 5. If anybody wants one. I'm sorry, one thing to throw it at you guys.
You say age.
I don't always have anymore because they used to give them to me to provide.
If you wanna contact me, Capital City Village, my phone number is this cell phone. I can mail them to you, I
Well,
have them.
You have them. Oh, okay. Johanna has some available. Yeah, they don't make them this year. Oh, yes, File of Life, same thing. Okay, yes.
You don't have anything. Does your staff automatically have a?
That's a great question, Maury. Maury's asking, so if you don't have, it's Maury, right? Yeah. If you don't have a medical power of attorney, what do? So at the healthcare facility, they look to your spouse first, grown children, and it doesn't matter age rank. It's really who's available and who is there speaking for you. Parent, sibling, and then nearest relatives. And so it's that order that they look for to make medical choices for you. Yeah.
And if the person on the medical power of attorney is no longer able to make a decision,
Then they drop down to your alternate agent. So he's asking, what if your primary person has dementia now or is passed away? Then they drop down to your alternate agents. I had a little 92-year-old lady that I went, she was so proud she had hers done. We pulled it out and looked at it and all 3 people were no longer here. But she just needed to do a new one, but that can happen. This form is really easy to redo if you need to. The one with the closest date to the present date is the effective form. I had at the hospital a family that brought 9 forms up to me. And I think every time they got in a fight, they just said, I'm redoing my medical power of attorney, and they did. So it's really easy to redo. You just simply put your name across the top, your primary person, you want to make medical decisions. There is a space for limitations underneath that. Most of the time that's left blank, but a good example that I know of is Jehovah Witnesses don't want blood products, or most of them don't, so they may write that across the middle board. Is there anything else that you've seen there specifically? Below that, you would put your first and second alternate agents. Sometimes they say it's best if there's at least one local person on here, but one nice thing from COVID that we did learn is that a lot of decisions can be made by phone. So if your loved ones, maybe all of your children are out of state, that's okay. You can, pick your children, but it is best that they can be reached. Like if one of your sons or daughters is in the Navy and they're out at sea and they cannot be reached, that's not the best person for your primary person. I had another situation come up the other day where their loved one lived in Iowa. They didn't really have a great phone. Their cell phone that they were trying to utilize there wasn't always, didn't always receive a signal. And so that person in Iowa was not the best person to be their primary. So think about those things also. On the top of page 3, that's where they say, please don't make any marks on this or make any changes on it. It makes the document not valid. So if somebody got married or as long as their name is who it is and we can reach them. But it's best just to redo the form so that everything is correct with the phone number. On page 3, you can have a notary witness your signature, or on the back page, the keyword or, you can have 2 witnesses observe your signature and it's done. It's really that easy. They ask that witness 1 not be of blood or marriage, not going to gain anything from your estate, or not in direct care of you. And so that's witness 1, but witness 2 can be any of those things if you'd like. So Mary Beth and myself can be your witnesses and we can complete that for you today. If you'd like to do your medical power of attorney. What questions about this form do we have? Yes, ma'am. Correct. Yes. She said, if you want to be resuscitated, then we don't bother with the do not resuscitate order for adults, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, but correct.
Up to the lineage of relatives. The kids, the spouse, the siblings. What is the law? You said nearest relative, physically. Is that another state?
So whoever is available to come up and speak for them, or whoever they can locate at the hospitals, that has been my experience.
Yeah, it's a good question about nearest. I always thought of it as what's the closest relation.
Right,
Bloodline wise, but it hasn't occurred to me. Well, it's like geographically.
Well,
like physically nearest relatives in our.
Yeah, usually if it's, you think it might be confusing, it's good to designate the person.
yeah, for sure.
And anyone over the age of 18 can have a medical power of attorney, 18-year-old, should have a medical. Not just for old people, that's kind of focused thing, but.
Yeah.
Really.
So helping your grandchildren do their form, your kids do their forms is important, especially if they're maybe single. Or maybe married and somebody you don't think their spouse should be making those choices. But everybody should have a medical power of attorney over the age of 18. It is 2 o'clock. If anybody does need to excuse themselves, I need about 7 minutes.
Caveat, make sure that you just don't put somebody's name down there, and it's gonna be a big old surprise if they're called and say, oh, by the way, did you know you're your mom's medical power of attorney? What? You want to ask them, what is the true thing you can do, ask your medical power of attorney, ask your alternates, and then of course tell them. They say, well, yeah, but what is it that, what is it that I need to do? Would be most of us will say, well, what do you want me to do?
So, I'm not just putting your name down with her number, but that conversation is so important.
Yeah, make copies for them, email them, so scan them or ask us to scan them, we can email them to them. And then that way you can just, if you're in the hospital, like my mom and I need my mom's medical power of attorney, I just type MPOA in my Gmail account and my mom's MPOA pops up and I can locate it. It's a lot better than trying to find it in a file folder somewhere. Yes, ma'am.
So I have to run. I know many of you, some of you I've not met before. And normally I work for 12 months. That doesn't really matter, but sadly I have a 2:00 meeting, so I have to leave. But I wanted to add this before I left. For so many of you who are doing this, we talking about family. Like we had these lovely folks here in September. We plan to do this at least once a year here. If this is helpful for y'all, or you want your family, like, just then we'll do it again, and we wanna keep having these conversations. So, tell people it's great, so that they also know that they need to do it.
Thanks, Rachel. So 5 minutes and then, we'll answer some more questions. Do you have a question about the,
Yeah, on the medical power of attorney, the first alternate, can you put your primary doctor's name?
So you have to talk to your doctor. Usually the doctors do not, but
Be very good that doctor would feel comfortable being in that role.
Unless they're relative.
unless they're a dear friend, so you have, just always ask first. Yes.
One question. I go for my annual physical, could I have this signed by my?
Yes, and we'll talk about that quickly. Okay, so the directive to physician and family is known as also as a living will. And once again, this form only goes into effect when you cannot speak for yourself, but two conditions come up and doctors deem that with these two conditions, there are certain things that you would or would not want. So this is a directive to your healthcare providers and your family. So you would simply put your name across that little box there. And the first one says, if my doctor says that I have a terminal condition and they think that I may die within 6 months, would I prefer to be kept comfortable and allowed to die as gently as possible? Or would I like to be kept alive on all available life-sustaining treatment? And you would just initial which box you would prefer in that situation. The next situation says, my doctor thinks that I have an irreversible condition. I cannot care for myself and I can't make decisions for myself. I would like to be kept alive and all available, using all available life-sustaining treatment, or be kept comfortable in that situation. And the best example on that one is like an Alzheimer's dementia, where somebody may live a while for 15 to 20 years with this condition, not know what's going on, not be able to care for themselves, make decisions. What would you want in that situation? On the back side, there is an opportunity once again to fill out anything specific that you may or may not want. The middle section, there is a place to put two people's names if you do not have a medical power of attorney. But right below in bold, it says, please don't do that. Just do a medical power of attorney. And they're so easy to complete. And then you would sign it in the presence of two witnesses. There isn't even a spot for a notary on this form. They do ask again that witness one not be a blood or marriage related, not in direct care of you, and not going to gain anything from your estate. I will take questions at the end, and then this last form that we've had some questions talked about, but this is the out of hospital do not resuscitate order for adults. This is the directive that does need a medical doctor's signature on it in order to be valid. So it is the smallest font possible. I know, I'm so sorry. But this form is when you know for a fact that you do not want CPR out in the community. Out in the community includes the emergency room at the hospital. that is still considered out of the hospital because we have not been admitted into the hospital. And somebody asked earlier, every time we are admitted into the hospital, they ask our, the person or their loved ones, what resuscitation status do you want? And they do have a list of things that are more specific because they are at the hospital and they have access to those things. In the community, this form for CPR resuscitation includes 4 interventions. The CPR, which is so this is when our heart stops beating or we stop breathing. It includes the chest compressions that Mary Beth talked about that rests on our heart to circulate the blood throughout our body. It includes some sort of rescue breathing that is up to the rescuer to decide if they are going to attempt any sort of mouth-to-mouth or rescue breathing. It includes the defibrillator patches. I know that there's a defibrillator out in the hall, but you would apply those patches and it'll read the heart rhythm that's going on. It's pretty amazing. A lay person could utilize it if somebody is down on the ground. But that defibrillator may shock a person's heart or pace a person's heart. And those are the 4 interventions that are included in this form. So if you know for a fact that you do not want to be resuscitated, that's when you would put this form into place. Typically, it's when we're of a more advanced age, or maybe we have some terminal illnesses that lead us to a position in our life that we know CPR is not of much benefit. So on this form, everybody that signs the top portion of this form has to sign this very teeny bottom portion. And I would say about 50% of the forms that I see in the home setting are not filled out appropriately and do not protect that person from first responders doing CPR on them. Once you have this completed, so you have to have the doctor sign it, and sometimes the doctors miss that bottom spot. You got to be very, very good to watch. You can go to the Texas Department of Health website and purchase a little medical medallion. They will ask that you scan in or email or fax a completed form so they can see it. And you can purchase a bracelet that they'll engrave with your name and has all of the information that first responders would need to not do CPR, but to provide comfort care if they found you down out in the community. So that would be, medications to bring you comfort if you were struggling to breathe, oxygen, if, help position you and to get you to the hospital, but they would not do the CPR resuscitation measures. So I know, what's that?
I have 10.
Yes.
The iPhone actually has a way that first responders can get your information, your descriptions, instructions, and you just make sure that you add that information.
So yes, correct. There is an app for especially iPhones called My Directives that you can add to the locked screen. Not all first responders will look on a person's phone. We've talked to a few and asked them what happens in practice, but it doesn't hurt. You can scan your documents into that. You can add your medications, your medical information, your emergency contacts. Also, when you renew your driver's license, there is a spot for 2 emergency people. So that way, if you're in a car wreck, they can scan your driver's license or your driver's license plate, and they'll know immediately and be able to say, Ellen, your loved one is at the hospital, go to Seton and meet them there, right? Instead of trying to figure out who I am and who my husband might be and what their phone number would be. They know immediately who to call and say, please go to North Austin Medical Center.
Does that also work for Android phone?
On Android phones, you can add it emergency contacts, but the app you have to pay for. I think it's like $4 or $5.
Okay.
I haven't tried it.
The iPhone is not an app, it's built in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can do this, but who would want that idea? This comes up, you just do medical ID.
Oh, so
and all that.
you must be on what, the newest version.
That's been there for many versions.
What if your phone is password protected?
So this should be on your lock screen, so you
Yeah.
can check your lock screen.
Yeah.
We can look at you and see. There were a couple questions about the DNR. DNR, if they ask to please copy the back instructions, if you're making copies for people. They also say firefighters ask that you put it by the front door of your home. A lot of people have been told, you know, put it on your refrigerator. Well, we ask in practice and they say, you know, we really don't go to the refrigerator unless you're in the kitchen. You know, but we'll come through the front door. And so if you can just tape it on the back, or some people just put it, you know, on a little ledge or something. So that way it's immediately there and they can access that, that's helpful. We also have in something available, Mary Beth, so these organizing affair booklets are one, available printed, and two, also available on our hospiceaustin.org website. It's usually a packet of information agencies charge for, but it is exactly what it says it's doing. This is organizing all your affairs. If we were to suddenly pass away or be in a car accident, our loved ones would have all of our vital information and be able to close our affairs out and not have to figure out if mom or dad had Bitcoin or, you know, a Swiss bank account and we can't access that. Your bills, your insurances, your bank accounts. This is, you know, private information. Don't leave this out. One of our coworkers puts it in a Ziploc baggie and actually stores it in her deep freezer because it wouldn't catch on fire and her family would know where it is, but it, you know, it's protected in there.
It's old.
Uh-huh. A lot of people do it on the computer because, you know, passwords change all the time. And so you can download it from our website and just do it on the computer. Just be sure your loved ones have your password to the computer. That's the big piece. I met a little lady, their computer was sitting there and she said, my husband died suddenly. I can't access any information. And she didn't have the money to take it to, you know, a nerd's computer place to break into it yet. In this little packet of information, there is some amazing stuff in there. It kind of just puts, there's a place on page 7 for like any personal belongings that may have sentimental value that you want somebody to have. You can write a little story about the stained glass window over your kitchen and why it's important to you and who you might want to have that. There's some documents that are there to kind of put into place and think about. There's some information about your medical history, your final wishes, maybe a memorial service or celebration of life. I don't know if you've ever had to put together all of that homework when we've lost a loved one and trying to figure out their parents' names, or their high school that they went to. So it's a lot of work for a grieving heart. You can ease their grieving heart by having this completed. Page 13 is also one of my favorite. It's called an ethical will. And those are just your words and your legacy to leave to your family and friends. You can do a little video so that maybe your great grandchildren that you weren't gonna get to meet, sorry, don't mean to burst anybody's bubble, but can have an opportunity to hear you and see what you thought. So make a little video for them, or fill out page 13 and share some of your words of wisdom. And so you're welcome to stay, ask questions. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm sorry we went over a little bit today. Time got away from us, but we are super excited to be here. Yes.
Your survey.
Oh, yes.
And we have go back here and organizing affairs.